Prepare yourself to invest a few minutes with the Make Each Click Count podcast to discover new details and how to accelerate your sales and profits while making sure you're getting the absolute most out of your online marketing dollars. Hosted by Andy Splichal, who's been running paid click campaigns for his clients for 20 plus years. Join us and discover what's working today and start making each click count. Without further ado, here's the acclaimed author of the Make Each Click Count book series, the founder of True Online Presence, the founder of Make Each Click Count University, and the host with the most, Andy Splichal.
Welcome to the Make Each Click Count podcast. This is your host, Andy Splichal. We are happy to welcome this week's guest to discuss today's topic, which is redemption, gratitude, and lessons you won't soon forget. Special guest, Quan Huynh. Today's guest, it's a bit different than my usual guest. He's not here to talk about a new app or what external systems may improve your website conversion. In fact, I'm a little lost on how to introduce him today. So let me ask, Quan, how would you like to be introduced?
I typically like to be introduced. The first slide in my bio says Quan's been described as a mighty warrior, magician, and a mountain of goodness. That's how I like to be introduced. It was given when I was in prison. It was on this sheet. One of the volunteers came in, and that's how she wrote to me. She said, "Quan, you're a mighty warrior, magician, and a mountain of goodness." And those words just resonated with me, and I just held on to it all these years.
I like it. Now, I usually go backwards in my episodes, and I first dive into what listeners can gain and some actionable steps they can take surrounding the topic. And then I do the introduction and offer if the guest has one at the end of the episode. But again, this episode's a bit different. Why don't we go in? Can you give us a brief introduction about your background right up front?
Sure. First generation Vietnamese refugees. When we lost our country, I came to the United States when I was just a couple months old, and we settled in Provo, Utah. My father's condition my father got diagnosed with leukemia when I was 8. We moved out here to California when I was 10, and I've been out in Southern California since.
Okay, great. Now, we met, just a little background on that. We met through a mutual acquaintance who runs a marketing community and convinced me to come with him and his group to partake in a day in prison, teaching entrepreneurs skills. And it turns out that Quan runs the local chapter of the organization called Defy. And you recently sent me a copy of your book, Sparrow and the Razor Wire, Finding the Freedom While Serving a Life Sentence, which I have right here. Thank you very much, by the way. It's a fantastic book. I picked it up the mailbox a couple days ago, and I read it in 2 days. So I couldn't put it down. Maybe it's because I know you, but I mean, I thought it was great. How long after prison did you write this book?
After prison, the book came out during COVID 2020. So it was about 5 years, about 4 years after I began writing.
And I got to say, it's got a ton of lessons. And like I said, I mean, you're an amazing writer, but
Thank you.
Wow. I mean, the first part of the book was incredibly dark when you're talking about your growing up and what got you where you were, and comparing that to meeting you now. I mean, I couldn't believe that was you. Maybe that's why maybe I couldn't put it down. There's a ton of lessons that people can take from this book, I thought, regardless if you're in prison or not. And a lot of those were self-responsibility, the ability, studying to overcome a problem. I guess let's talk about the idea of self-responsibility. How did you incorporate that in your life? Where did that come from for you?
It wasn't something overnight. I would have to say like the first 10 years, 10, 12 years of my life sentence, I just lived the way I wanted to live in prison. For your listeners that may not know, I went to prison for a murder that I did commit, and was given a 15-year to life sentence here in California. So I think the lessons came later on when I've always been a big book reader. That's where I found my escape. And I've been known to go down like rabbit trails when let's say I read a book, I'm fascinated with that subject. I'll look in the acknowledgments. I'll see what other authors influenced their writing or like where they got their research from, and I'll dive into those books. And I just go down rabbit trails all the time. And it was around the 11th, 12th year of my sentence when I was reading books on entrepreneurship and things like that. And somehow I stumbled on books on the saints, and in particular stories about saints that had failed in their lives, but yet had gone on to create these orders and these amazing legacies. And those stories fascinated me. And then, of course, reading those stories took me down other rabbit trails on books on mindfulness and spirituality and everything. So for me, they all created this perfect storm in my head where one day on the prison yard, like my head filled with these readings, these teachings, I asked myself the question, like, why do I have to view prison as punishment? Why can't I view this as a place where I can remake myself, even if I'm going to die here? And, of course, the answer comes back from the universe. Yeah, you can. And that moment at Solano, prison is nestled like right between these hills, and the sun was barely coming up. I could feel its warmth. And in the little blades of grass, I saw the individual drops of dew. And up above me in the razor wire, I heard a sparrow chirping. And I tell everyone, like, that sparrows have probably been chirping my whole prison term, but I never heard it. But that day I heard it, and it was from that day forth that I would have to say my journey to awakening began. My journey to personal responsibility, where that's actually where I found my own inner freedom way before I was paroled. Just taking those lessons of responsibility and owning my choices, knowing every moment I have a choice. That's so. But it wasn't like, okay, suddenly it's like becoming fascinated with different topics like personal responsibility and mindfulness, and then using my journals and using every day as an opportunity to practice these lessons that I want to apply in my life. And many times going back and journaling each evening and realizing, oh, I didn't live up to what I aspired to, but yet viewing tomorrow as a new day and going back at it.
Yeah, journaling is one of those things that is suggested by a lot of people, but very few do it. I'm curious, have you been able to keep up the habit of journaling?
Out here? No, not like how I was doing it, so disciplined in there, but not as much out here.
The other habit that people have out here that is the same is but self-responsibility and not taking self-responsibility, whether you're a business owner and you're thinking, the market's against me. It's never their fault, right? It's really hard to have that skill. So I thought that was eye-opening. Another thing when I was reading your book that I thought was incredibly eye-opening is when you said that there are more people in prison than outside prison that work on self-examination, making it a lot more difficult to communicate on the outside. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think while we were incarcerated, a lot of the men, especially when before I paroled, a lot of us were practicing, personal responsibility and learning how to effectively communicate, how to speak nonviolently, like just how words can really harm or hurt people, or words can also build and heal people. And I think we became very aware of that. Maybe because it's the stakes also inside prison, where, if you're screaming or yelling at somebody, it can lead to violence very fast. But out here, it's a different world in many respects when people communicate. There's not this way of, there's not a dignified way of speaking to people and recognizing them as just human beings. I think there's a lot of people out here that have baggage also, and they didn't have to work on self-examination. So that's just how they've shown up their whole life, and that's just how they show up every day. So you see it in traffic jams, I see it Costco lines. I see it happening a lot out here.
Yeah, no, that's great points. Now, another thing that really just jumped off the page to me is you had wrote in the beginning of the book, when you committed the crime, you went back home, and even before you were arrested, everything just seemed dull and bland to you. When did that all come back, where you're present in the moment now and you get excited by stuff? I mean, when did that flip, the switch occur?
In prison, during my life sentence, after that sparrow in the razor wire moment, I think one of the first things I did was I checked in to see a therapist, and I began. It was 25 years after my father passed away is when I began grieving his death, and then of course I became fascinated with the grief and loss process, like in particular Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model on grief and loss. And then I noticed around me, like every man had some form of loss or grief going on, whether that's losing a wife or a partner that has moved on, or losing children or parents that have now disowned them, losing friendships because they've established at a different prison, and now they're up for transfer, and there's no way to process this. So I saw there was so much hurt and need for healing, and so much need for grieving around me, and the prison didn't have it. So I put together a syllabus, and I submitted it to the prison psychologist, who loved it, and we created the prison's first ever grief and loss group. And it was in that group when I saw, like, immediately the impact of men being able to heal and share and shed tears. And that's is where I would have to say, suddenly I felt alive. I'm like, oh, I think I found a place and things I can do. So of course I got involved with other groups, created other self-help groups. And for me, it just became a journey of refinement and discovery and looking to make impact. I mean, like, I look at it like, okay, here I am in this discarded, forgotten corner of the world that nobody would know about, nobody even cares about, but yet I felt that I was there, I was able to make impact, I felt alive, and that's where life began for me again.
By helping others and making an impact.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed that you also talked about a personal mission statement, which, besides journaling, I've done that. I created a personal mission statement, but I worked on it forever, but you read it every day. And that really impressed me. Would you be willing to share that personal mission statement with listeners?
Sure. I have it here. It became, first for me, it was just journaling. And I saw like little lessons in different books I was reading. So I liked these lessons. I started like, these are reminders for myself. And I put it at the beginning of my journals. But then somewhere along the way, let me compile these all. And then I began shaping it. And then it looked like a jewel. And then that's why I called it Your Inner Jewel. Here it is. Practice mindfulness. Listen twice as much as you speak. Find today's lesson in today's difficulty. Strive for excellence in all that you pursue. Everyone is also on a journey. Learn from them all. You are responsible for every thought and word in this life. Seek balance and discipline. There is a fine line in everything you do. Listen for your voices of ego and pride and continue to remove them. Mind, body, heart, and soul, contribute to them constantly. Leave time daily to find your inner voice and trust in it. Effectiveness with people, efficiency with everything else. Do not fear failure. That is the only path to success. Accomplish transformation through your choices. Remember that perfection is not possible. Speak with kind, gentle, yet firm words. Never compromise with honesty. Give thanks for today. Laugh at life.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I tried to create mine, and the first time I referred or heard it referred to that you should create a personal mission statement is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. Is that where you decided? Did you read that? Did you read that?
I love that book. I would probably say that's probably where the seed was planted. Now that you bring it up, I don't like it's when I used to go back over my journals or I look back over my book reports. Once I began documenting each book I read, I noticed, oh, this is where that idea was planted. This is where that seed was planted. And I see how much it had grown or nurtured in my own soul. So I would not be surprised if that's probably where creating that my own mission statement came from.
How much did it change? Was that a first draft or is that a 592nd draft?
That was that was I think a year's draft of putting little things, and then once I began having enough things to like little lessons for myself, that's when I created it, and then that was just it. So yeah, I remember when I think it took over a year. It's not like an intentional draft. It was just like little reminders of lessons that I want to tell myself each day. Like, listening twice as much as I speak, or listening for my voices of ego and pride and continue to move them. And then, so once I put it, then I think the day that I shaped it, that was it. And I just loved how it was. And it just always resonated with me when I read it.
Now, in your book, you mentioned how much of a voracious reader you were, or are. I don't even know if do you still read that much?
Yeah, not as much as in prison, but I mean, I listen to books more now.
So I'm curious, what are the top 2 or 3 books that you would recommend for listeners that made the most difference in your life?
Oh my goodness, I don't know where to start. I guess it depends on, like, if it's for somebody in prison, depending on where they're at in the journey. Well, 7 Habits is a great book. The Road Less Traveled, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. That's something I could always open and reread. The Alchemist. So I don't know. I mean, but then if we're talking about like mindset shifts, there's other ones out here, Atomic Habits and any of Ryan Holiday's stuff, any of Malcolm Gladwell's stuff. I don't know. I guess it just depends on where somebody is at on their journey and what they're looking to discover within themselves.
Yes. Now let's switch it up and let's talk about your life after prison and Defy Ventures. Can you tell listeners a bit more about that organization?
Yeah, Defy Ventures is a national nonprofit. Our mission is to shift mindsets to give people with criminal histories their best shot at a second chance through career readiness, personal development, and entrepreneurship training programs that we run inside the prisons and in the communities. It's we run a 7-month program inside the prisons called the CEO of Your New Life. 1,200-page curriculum. I think it runs 4 books. The men or the women meet for about 5 hours of class instruction a week, plus another 5 to 8 hours of homework. And they begin working on themselves, but then it's through the lens of entrepreneurship. So their graduation culminates in a business pitch competition where each of them have to actually pitch a business. But then along the process, they learn, customer discovery. They learn what an MVP model can look like. And it's the lens of entrepreneurship that we instill in them, like the lessons of grit, resiliency, pivoting. We believe these are life lessons that they can use not only in their prison journey, but more importantly, in their reentry journeys when they come home. So I like to say, like, at Defy, we cultivate problem solvers, not complainers. So yes, here's the problem and here's their solution. So I see a lot of we call them entrepreneurs in training, or EITs for short. Our EITs come home. a lot of employers like hiring them because of that mindset that they have.
I joined you, of course, I think on the second one and then the graduation, but I didn't ask you, and I was kind of curious, what kind of success rates do you have with the participants, the EITs, once they come home? How many of them start their own business? How many of them successfully adjust, I guess?
Yeah, love this question, and I always throw it back to the question there, like, what do you consider success if we're talking about business, or are we talking about them not going back to prison? We could share plenty of stories about men and women that have come home and built businesses. I think we've helped launch and incubate over 150 businesses, but I think the bigger success stories are the ones that are now home, or have a family, raising a family, buying their homes, working. If you are looking for data, our success rates of here in California, as you may know, the studies say 2 out of 3 released men and women will go back in within 3 years. 2 out of 3.
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3. So Defy's numbers, less than 15% at the 3-year mark. So those are numbers we're proud of. 84% of our EITs, once they begin looking for work, will find work within 90 days. If you contrast that with other studies that say, unemployment rates could be as high as 60% at the 1-year mark for someone that's faced incarceration. So we believe it's a combination of not only our curriculum, the community we've been able to build, the volunteers that have come in with us and helped us to build this community that now help us to effectively create systems change that we're going after. I mean, we could build the best in-prison program, but if these men and women are coming home and still facing discrimination and still basically have to do a second sentence out here and discriminated against for housing, fair lending, employment, all of that, then what good does it do? So our mission, we believe, is twofold. It's not only shifting the mindsets of those incarcerated, but also shifting the mindset of those who we believe could actually help us achieve system change, and that's the business community. That's why we intentionally recruit from the business community, the tech space, VCs, serial entrepreneurs.
Now, what type of people typically do volunteer for Defy Ventures with you?
Amazing human beings with big hearts. A lot of people in the business world, which is, I think, it breaks the mold of what people, when they say, oh, the capitalist society, they think it's cold. They think people are not giving. And the people that usually come in with this, the vast majority, open-hearted, big human beings, amazing human beings.
Now, if you look at Defy Ventures, there's some rocky stuff out there. What's happened over the last few years with the leadership of Defy, and I looked that up when I was doing research on it. How did Defy get over this change in leadership, and how's it doing today?
I think so. The answer, we're doing much better than we ever were, financially, structurally, process-wise, system-wise. Our previous founder had resigned after a negative news article. This, I think, way back in 2018, was by a disgruntled former employee. But after that, our present CEO basically had to write a burning ship and reorganize and restructure the organization. So I would have to say he's done a fantastic job. Throughout the transition, all of our prison programs were still running, and now we're even bigger and stronger and better. So I think we also had to embrace pivoting. We also had to embrace the lessons of entrepreneurship at Defy, and I think we've come out much stronger because of it.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do a little bit. What's your favorite EIT success story?
My favorite, you know what? I have several, but give one. Like I know this man pitched a business in San Diego about it was a great pitch, one of the best pitches I've heard. He loves bees and the way he talks about it, and he wanted to do his bee colony. He came home during the pandemic. He got first place at the event, so he had a $500 IOU. With this $500, he purchased his first bee colony during the pandemic and pursued his business. He now has, I think, 3 colonies running. He sent us at the office a couple jars of his honey. It has honeycombs in it, the best honey I've ever tasted. He says he's looking to continue to build his business on it. I mean, that's on a small scale one. I mean, there's another guy that came home, was one of my good friends. He's now doing a dog training business. He was working with rescue dogs in prison. Then he was also a Defy grad, and now he's out here training dogs, and I see the results that he's doing. So those are just a couple off the top of my head. Another one is a woman. She's in NorCal. She lost her grandmother while she was incarcerated, and realized like there were a bunch of questions that she never got to ask her grandma. And she made sure that she was intentional about sharing and having stories with her own children. So her business was around baking, but in baking, she also includes questions, ready-made questions, so that so her business, she sells like ready baking, like cookies and things like that. But then there's also conversation cards for the parent and their loved one or their little children to ask questions of each other so they could continue to build bonds. So I think it's cool to see our EITs pursuing their passions through their individual prison experiences.
Now, are there any other organizations doing what Defy is doing?
Doing specifically what we're doing, like building, I wouldn't, not that I know of. There may be some similar but adjacent ones, but not particularly like how we're approaching it, with tying in, you know, the business community with this in supporting and in building a community that can continue to make an impact.
So if you had a crystal ball, where do you see Defy Ventures going over the next 12 to 18 months?
Crystal ball would be magic wand or crystal ball. But,
yeah, your choice.
Well, if I had my magic wand, I'd love to be able to get our program into every prison in California. But I see the crystal ball about 12, 18 months. Here in SoCal, I see Defy expanding our services to include more men and women in the local prisons, but also transitional homes and possibly working with transitional age youth in the communities. That's and continuing to just to build our infrastructure. I would say deepening relationships with the business community and foundations in Southern California to help build out what we got going.
And how can an interested listener learn more about your organization, even joining you and making a difference with Defy Ventures?
They could go right to our website at defyventures.org. Defy is like defying the odds, .org. Yeah, they go right there. They can see everything that we're doing. They could sign up for events, reach out to different chapters. I mean, we're in 8 states currently, so there's quite a bit of opportunities to join us in prison or in our post-release programs. If you have employers that are listening and are interested in discussing fair chance hiring and what that looks like, I'd love to have a conversation with them. I mean, like I tell employers all the time, like we're not asking you to give jobs here. What we're asking you to do is do your interviews, and if the best possible candidate happens to be one of our EITs, then we're asking you to either be willing to look past the criminal conviction or have an additional conversation with them. Don't just blacklist them just because a criminal conviction comes up on them.
Right. And you guys are also tax deductible for donations, right?
Yes. Yep. It can support us financially, of course. Yeah. That's always great too.
Cool. Well, this has been great today, Quan. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, thank you for joining us in prison. I hope you hope to see you at future events.
This has been great. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Quan.
Okay. Thank
For
you.
listeners, remember, if you like this episode, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us an honest review. And if you're looking for more information regarding Defy Ventures or connecting with Quan, you will find the links in the show notes below. In addition, if you're looking for more information on growing your business, check out our podcast resource center available at podcast.makeeachclickcount.com. We have compiled all our different past guests by show topic and included each of their contact information in case you would like more information, any of the services we've discussed during previous episodes. Well, that's it for today. Remember to stay safe, keep healthy, and happy marketing. And I'll talk to you in the next episode.
This has been the Make Each Click Count podcast. Remember, those that want to make more sales and profits online, listen to this podcast. The ones that want to discover how to do it faster, invest in themselves and their business through Make Each Click Count University. Join our private Make Each Click Count Facebook group or send us an email to info@makeeachclickcount.com. We want to know who you are and any questions that you may have regarding online marketing.